Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the latest VisioCare Vision Webinar with VisioCare Services. Thank you so much for joining us on this rather sticky September evening. It is a little bit warm, so we do appreciate you joining us live. We are interactive, so there is a chat room just to the side of your screen. So if you have any questions as we go through, do feel free to submit your questions. I'll keep an eye on those, and I'll put them to Alan either at the end, or if they're really pressing, we'll put them in during there. So just so you know, we're looking to be within an hour, but we appreciate you putting in as many questions, as many comments into the chat room as you can. It's good feedback for us. And as I say, we would love to put your questions directly to Alan. So first of all, quick introduction as to who Alan is. I'm sure you all know, but just a bit of background. Alan's been a veterinary surgeon in practice for over 20 years, a successful business consultant to over 1,200 practices worldwide, and a director of Vet Dynamics. His mission is reigniting purpose, passion, people, and performance in independent veterinary practices. His company, Vet Dynamics, works with independent practices to provide personalized support and resources for practice performance, business intelligence, leadership and culture, and team engagement. So without further ado, I'm not going to talk anymore. I'm going to pass you over to Alan. Alan, good evening.
Jay, thank you very much. Thanks for that introduction. It's always a nice reminder of what I do occasionally from there. Thanks, everyone, for turning up. Just to help me out a little bit here, if people want to just go into the chat and perhaps put where they're from and really what their role is in practice. Are you a vet, a practice manager, nurse, admin? What's your role? And that'll just give me a little bit of a chance to know who I'm speaking to. So don't be shy. Just jump in there and give us a little bit of indication. Would be really helpful. And while you're doing that, I'll jump into the slides. Thanks, Julie. That's great. Stuart, excellent. Mark, good. Far and wide we're coming from, so that's good. Plenty of people all over the place. Practice manager, Chris Ireland, which is great. Julie, hi. Fiona. Okay, brilliant. Martin, hi. Good to see you on board. Excellent. So we've got vets, owners of businesses, practice managers, people interested in these sorts of things. What we're talking about tonight is a part of a series, and you might have noticed if you signed up for this, you actually signed up for 3 webinars. Now, that might be overkill, but we have spaced them out to a reasonable degree. But one of my passions at the moment is thinking about what the practice of the future looks like. And the future has actually arrived. We're kind of at the end of a very long COVID tunnel, and we're coming out the other side. And there's what I'm seeing with clients and with practices in general and through discussions I'm having is a keenness to get back to normal, getting back to where we were. Now, that worries me a little bit, and I'm just wondering if it worries you guys as well, which is why you're here, because there's a suspicion that the normal we left behind was kind of broken. Now, I get a bit morbid with some of this stuff, and I can get a little bit depressive, but let me just explain what I feel about this. And what these 3 webinars are meant to do is provide a framework, basically a framework. There's many frameworks we could use, but it's a framework for how do we start to rethink our practice for the future so it's a better place for our people. We provide better medicine. We help our patients better. We can help our clients. We can help the team much more so because we're in a state of crisis, I would say. Certainly many of you will be severely under pressure from a recruitment crisis. There's a client and resource crisis. There's a crisis because there's more and more pets out there. And some of you may be in practices that are either limiting your own clients' numbers or you're surrounded by practices who may have closed their books as well. And so there's this sort of lot going on. Now, that's the current symptoms we seem to be up against. For me, I think there's a deeper malaise at work and there's other things going on that we need to be aware of. And what these webinars are geared to do is, are there some, not easy fixes, there's no easy fixes, are there some things you can be thinking about that help us understand who we are, as in getting back to a sense of identity, which is particularly what this webinar is about, how we operate and can we operate better to alleviate some of these things, and then how do we grow? Because that's really the long-term aim of business, etc. But let me just go through these crises that I feel have led to this state. And I'd be interested in any comments you want to feed back on this. But 5 key things is, number one, a crisis of identity. It's who we are and what we do is all down to our personal veterinary and professional identity as a profession, as individuals, as vets, as nurses, and working in veterinary practices. And I think that's been lost somewhere due to a fundamental lack of personal flow and trust within our businesses and also with our clients, and therefore reduced curiosity and enjoyment and compassion and intrinsic motivation. I just don't see people enjoying veterinary work as much as they actually should do. And I don't know if you agree with that. And if you're one of the people who really do enjoy their work, well, you're very lucky, it seems to me. But that's not a criticism. That's just a result of what's going on. Second thing I see is a crisis of meaning. And when I say meaning, I mean purpose, I mean legacy. It's why we do what we do. Why do we get up in the morning? Why do we turn up? Why do we do this job? And I feel there's a loss of people's engagement with that sense of purpose. Too much focus on clinical skills and expertise and perfectionism and gold standards and profit and other such things. And, I'm not making this an independent corporate thing, but certainly the landscape shifting there as well. And that's all at the expense of personal and collective sense of purpose, why we are vets, etc. And that's a harder one to get your head around. Those first 2 is really what I want to look at in this particular webinar. Beyond that, I think there's a crisis of control, or how we feel we have control of our lives, of our business. We've lost control of our world in a sea of uncertainty. Well, certainly COVID's added to that, and ambiguity. And of course, one of the things we've talked about a lot, and you may have seen in other webinars, is the focus on, can we focus on stuff we can influence rather than stuff we really can't control? Where do you put your energy into these things as we go? So this is unable to distinguish between what we can control, what controls us. Okay, so what we need here is, how can we take back a sense of autonomy, as in I've got choice and volition in what I do, and I'm willing to take accountability for that. But if we don't have that control, we can't take accountability and responsibility, and that's one thing that's missing from the process as well. As a result of that, then we see a crisis of motivation showing up as a lack of confidence, imposter syndrome, inability to value our professional time, indecision, and therefore when motivation is lacking, it means we're not growing, we're not developing, we're not taking on what's called mastery. Motivation grows from getting better at stuff. We can see ourselves improving. And of course, to do that, we need to measure progression, and we're not doing that stuff as well. And of course, what that ends up as is this crisis of employment or engagement even. People just not engaged with the profession, with the job. Masses of people having left the profession or downgraded from the profession. And the loss is 2 ways. There's people stepping out the top end. I've sold my practice to a corporate entity. I have enough money to not do so much work or do no work at all. And then there's attrition at the bottom end. People coming into the profession saying, not what I signed up for. I don't want to do this anymore. And so people, if they're going to work, they're turning up to work as a human resource. They're employed in a competitive, confusing, emotionally demanding veterinary industry, rather than coming in as engaged, energetic contributors to the job we signed up for. So I'd be interested, is that resonate with anyone? It all sounds very negative, but I can see these trends basically at work. What I want to suggest is there's ways and means to counteract this. And it's taking back some very basic principles in what we're doing with this. So these 3 webinars are organized across looking at a pan-pandemic future. What can we embrace as things that take it forward? Now, there's sort of these 9 imperatives. To be honest, this isn't my work. This has come from some work McKinsey's large consultancy business have put together for for the bigger worlds. But when I read this, it just said this resonates so much with the veterinary world. We need to share it. So we're going to go into number one, who we are, which is around about talking about our identity, how we turn up as vets in veterinary practice, but also in the communities and for ourselves and families and other people. And underneath this, there's three things that address identity or feed into it identity. It's the why. Why do we do what we do? Sense of purpose, legacy. It's the values, the guidelines, the things that we hold to be true and important for ourselves in particular. And of course, put that together collectively and you build a culture that starts to counteract some of those forces. Then in the next two webinars, we'll look at how we operate and then how we grow. So they sort of feed onto each other. So let's sort of dive into that and see how we go with that. And like I said, if you do have comments, certainly let me go. So these nine things sit as an ecosystem of activity. At the center is the identity piece. And identity might be a strange subject to consider or talk about, or maybe you don't talk about it. It's not something that comes up a lot in veterinary business talks because we're more about the operational end of things. You know, how we work and how we operate and how we grow might be more interest. But at the core of this, if we don't take this view on our identity driven by this sense of purpose, the values of what's really important in our lives, and this comes to work like that. And then how do we build a culture in a business that is resilient, sustainable, caring, compassionate, curious even, and taking this forward. And so this is kind of the model we'll be taking on. So this center three of who we are is really the important piece at this stage. Okay, so who we are is asking us about what our identity currently is. Can we change it? Can we strengthen it? Is it suitable for this post-pandemic world? Has it been suitable for a pre-pandemic world? Because the symptoms that we've seen throughout the profession have been disturbing me for a long time. So let's go back to some basic truths about identity and what it does for you in the business. People want to belong. Belonging is a key basic psychological need. We're social animals at heart. We need to be part of that. There's sort of three underpinning pieces that I talk about a lot. One is psychological safety at work. Do we just actually feel safe in our own skin? The other is self-worth. So that's the personal sense of actually, am I a worthy human being doing a worthy job in perhaps even a difficult world? The third one is then belonging and community, okay, is an absolutely essential part of who we are in our identity. And we take a lot of identity from the community we work with, okay? So people long to belong and they want to be part of something bigger than themselves. Now, I've talked about a lack of meaning. And to be honest, in the bigger, broader world, there's been an existential lack of meaning been coming on. It's maybe a generational thing, but it's certainly COVID has pushed it further. It's made everyone, you've heard the comment, COVID certainly made you think about your life, didn't it? And that's a reassessment of these things, okay? What's that bigger thing? Now, the point I'm making here is that veterinary business, the business either you run or work in, could be one of the things that's something bigger than yourself because you're contributing to something quite fantastic. The health and well-being of pets and their owners and the team of people you work with, I would say is how we have to place that. But practices that fixate only on profit or purely getting clinical skills done or just doing the job day to day because you're under pressure will lose ground to practices that create strong identity. And the identity factors are meeting needs of affiliation, social cohesion, purpose, and meaning, much as I've discussed. Okay, so that's what we're trying to do in regards identity, is give people something to attach to, because so many people are left adrift in the current world. And that's because there's a reduction in religion. We have a lack of faith in government. There's actually corporations seem to be something we can't trust anymore. So this lack of flow in our lives and lack of trust is all part of this. So if we can build something stronger for people to step into or at least connect to that has purpose and meaning, that's going to do people an awful lot of good. So where's that purpose and meaning come from? It comes from the values that we espouse, and that's the individual plus group, and then the culture we build. But let's go back a bit and let's just look at the current identity we carry as vets. And this is a bit of a personal journey for me of how this has looked, and this is my experience of working with lots and lots of practices and helping them improve and seeing where those things come along. Okay, so this is retrospective now. This is looking back, and it probably is still true. And if any of you heard my talks, you may have seen some of this previously. But what I see as a behavior, so from identity comes beliefs, attitudes, and finally comes behaviors, feelings and behaviors, how people turn up in the world. And that's the important part of purpose and meaning, because it drives our innate behaviors, particularly in difficult times. So what we see is too many vets just working far too hard, particularly at the moment, far too long, no time off, not getting the breaks, for far too little return in time and money and just sense of worth. Basically, here's just self-worth being eroded. And often it's because the business is inefficient, there's frustrations within it, and it's poorly profitable are some of the drivers in that. Equally now we've got the addition of really under-resourced in terms of vets and nurses. We've also got extreme busyness, pressure from clients. So we can add a lot of other things to this. So that's the behavioural outcome we've been talking about for long. That is shifting a little bit. But what we want to see is where's that coming from? Again, this is pre-COVID information. This was a survey done by the BVA in 2019. So this is nothing to do with the pandemic. This was the pre-existing state and conditions we had within the profession, which again comes back to a sense of professional identity for veterinary professionals. Basically, we saw a large number of people actively thinking about leaving the profession, and many people do leave. There seems to be this window of 5 to 7 years qualified where people just say, sorry, don't want to play this game anymore, and seem to step out of it. Equally, there's been obviously a commercial sellout to the corporatization, which is fine, but then a lot of those people have not stayed in the game, perhaps for other reasons, but of course they've had a cushion of some money going out. A lot of response feeling they're working just too hard. Oh boy, I bet that's true for many of you at the moment. A lot of people just can't cope with the demands of their jobs, resilience, burnout, anxiety, stress. All these things have been bandied around, looking in the press, masses of interventions trying to band-aid over this and keep it right. And like I said, this is nothing to do with COVID, but it must have only got worse in the interim times. And then finally, this disengagement, that this is where the employment crisis sort of it comes from, is that people just have said, I can't engage anymore. I can't be a vet. I can't be a nurse. I can't be in this business anymore because and this is the description of burnout. Now, again, pretty morbid and pretty depressing factors, but this was there before we started. And now we've had the added complication of this. I'm not saying COVID was a bad thing particularly. Obviously, it had its problems with health and everything else, but it actually did make people reassess a lot. So the question was, can we reassess from this particular spot? I want to dig a little bit deeper. Okay, so with those are the symptoms. And of course, if you're a good vet or a good nurse, we don't go on symptoms. We start to look for pathogenesis here. What's the underlying conditions we're looking for? We want sort of diagnosis before prescription for this. And so this is my view of working with veterinary businesses across a vast range over a long time, mind you. There is generally, and this is a tick list that some of you might want to just say, yeah, that's me, or maybe that's not me. But generally in practice, a lack of clarity of vision and purpose. Now, vision is the process of deciding how you'd like your life to be in the future, okay? And purpose is focusing your passions on some external purpose beyond yourself, as we've already discussed, okay? People don't have those discussions. They don't have a mission of turning up and doing good. Maybe implicitly they do. Maybe they had it when they graduated. Maybe it's been part of your life for a long time. Maybe some of you are still running on that. And if so, that's fantastic. Okay, and it might not be explicit. As a leader of a business, it's possibly easier for us to have that conversation with ourselves. What's necessary is have that conversation with the team. Because remember, we're trying to create a practice identity or an identity people can join. And this has some really practical applications, because if you're trying to recruit people and you can't elicit a vision or a purpose for those, something for those people to sign up to, it's going to be more difficult as such. Second thing we see is just generally this burnout or mindset of emotional resilience at a very low ebb, and therefore inability even to think about change, even to engage with change, and knowing they possibly have to, should, ought, must, but can't, because they just haven't got the bandwidth of mental capability or even emotional resilience at the moment through that, and sort of either burn out themselves or it's basically a lack of such things. Okay, we've always been a non-commercial lot. We favoured the clinical role of being vets and fixing animals, and this has been my life of talking to practices around, well, you really must value your time and charge properly. You've heard all that before. Some of that's been solved through COVID, because some practices are doing remarkably well with the over demand for work, and that's solved, but they still haven't put what I would call a commercial mindset to it, because again, they're just too tired, too busy, too burnt out. And the other thing I would say is, for most practices, there has been a lack of resources, capabilities, support, training, development, whatever you want to call it, for learning ways of taking this forward. I know some of you on the call that you do invest in these things and have invested quite heavily, but as a profession, it's always been secondary to this clinical things. So I'm probably talking the obvious to most of you in these things. And again, it's maybe a slightly negative connotation I'm putting it to it. But what I'm trying to do is get down to what things do we need to work on, change, help develop to move this stuff forward. Okay. There is also then this balance of what we do and why we do it. And this is what I call the veterinary myths that we sort of labor under. And these are the myths around the profession. And the interesting thing is, this was perhaps what the clients believe about us, but we also believe on behalf of the clients. It's something built into the DNA of veterinary training and development. Number one, we believe we do this job purely for the animals, not for the money, not for other reward, not even for ourselves. And so we have this self-sacrificial altruism at play. Again, I would suggest COVID's knocked a little bit of that out of us by saying, guys, if we're not looking after ourselves, no one else will. But still struggling with, I got to turn up to work, I've got to help the clients. The altruism is to a degree pathological. It's a great trait for as a vet, but it's a dangerous one if it's left unchecked. Social contract means that we bend over backwards for the client. And now that might be through the altruism. It could also be through fear and obligation and guilt, that we actually try and treat everybody equally across the board. And the reality of this is, we can treat anybody, but we can't treat everybody. Hence, practices are making the really hard decision of shutting their books or restricting client numbers, or just not coping, basically, in many ways. There is then an underlying sense of, and this is a deeper long-term thing, expertise and perfectionism. You've got to be right about this. There's only one way of doing this, and that limits the capability of thinking about change. If this is what everyone else is doing, I can't do anything different. And we're having lots of conversations around, well, there are other ways of doing it. And change is absolutely inherent in this. And this sort of narrow view of the perfect way of doing things can be a restriction. If it's not you, you probably know someone like that. And the final thing is this, the sense of busyness has almost become an indicator for success. So if I ask a practice owner, how are you doing? They could often reply, oh, really busy. And I have to respond with, well, that's not what I asked, because busyness doesn't mean success. It doesn't mean performance. It doesn't mean profit. It doesn't mean anything more than you're just really, really busy, and therefore probably not particularly profitable, but you are probably very stressed, burnt out, and out of flow. And this is, if you learn anything from this, it's taking control of what I call the busy trap. Okay, the numbers of clients come through, because this is one of the primary burnout factors in our profession, and we can judge this by active clients per vet, capacity of our consulting, numbers of new client registrations, all sorts of measures, and I won't go in it too much, but if you're continually taking on new clients, taking on work because you feel you have to, and your staff and your team are burning as a result of it, you have a duty of care to actually do something about it. Now, I will say it's one of the hardest decisions to make a difference on, but sometimes we just go say stop. And of course, then if you lose a team member through being pinged or COVID or illness or others or holidays even, you've just added the burden to someone else. And because this is the difficult stage we're in at the moment. But like I said, that's the circumstance. It's the identity, the beliefs underlying this that I want you to think about and focus on. What makes us act in that way? Can we not be more selfish and self-serving because we've got to be to actually survive through this process is what I'm asking. So what we're seeing is 3.5 million new pets. Business is absolutely booming, okay? But the people are breaking. People aren't coming through this well. And I would say this is a consequence of a lot of beliefs and myths that the veterinary world carries about themselves in business. And again, I'd be happy to hear any comments around that, of how you perceive that as a process. However, there is room for improvement here. So this is my recipe for it. We've got this lack of meaning and autonomy and purpose I've talked about. We've got this sort of fixed scientific mindset that's to a degree inflexible to change because of stress and strain. More clinical, maybe profit orientated with some of the business models out there, but it's definitely a non-commercial approach that it goes to. And of course, lack of personal and interpersonal and environmental resources with it. Add to that, individuals' personal threshold to stress, and we know this is a stress-ridden profession. Repeated daily trauma of dealing with clients, dealing with emotion, dealing with euthanasia, dealing with animals that are ill, and then just put it into a stress one. It's not a great recipe. It really is a difficult thing. And so we have this damaging but disintegrating vet identity. And the reason I'm sort of being so heavy on this, because if we don't rebuild this, or actually if you don't rebuild this within your own business, and that takes a lot of energy to actually get yourself on top of this, we're going to run into further problems as we go. And this isn't a short-term fix, but I want to give you sort of some key things to work into that as we go. So here's kind of the difficulty model we got. We've got stressed individuals, we've got reduced teams, we've got constrained practice, we've got disrupted culture, we've got people not working in flow, we've got sort of low trust mechanisms going on that through stress, etc. Then we've got a whole pile of clients with exactly the same problems out there with new puppies, not knowing what to do with them, wanting to come in, maybe not wanting to sit in the car park, though some of them quite enjoy that. Maybe, and some of your vets enjoy having your clients in the car park. That's fine, etc. But it's not for everybody. So we've got this mixed bag of stuff we have to deal with. And this is circumstance at the moment, okay? And that's really, really difficult. But what I am saying is underlying this, even when this starts to resolve, even when we seem to maybe the resource problems, we're going to have the same underlying problems in this profession if we don't get back to some sense of identity of how we do this. And it's going to be an individual thing. I'm not sure how you solve this from an industry level view. I do know, working with my clients in Vet Dynamics, we do get some success with this because we have these conversations up front. So what I'd like to suggest is, can we put some of these suggestions up front for you? Now, there are some sort of basic things you can do to get right size your business. And I'll start from the bottom. Charge properly for your services. You've probably heard that before. Focusing on your professional time as a fee charging things, really get the finance, accounting and financial knowledge, improve communication, focus marketing. But the key things that are going to work is the identity pieces of leadership and vision, team engagement. They're going to be the primary drivers of this. And you'll say, that's really fine, Alan, I can understand that, but when am I going to do this? And that is going to be the difficult piece with it. So, but these are tactical things. These are very much tactical things that I've been suggesting. Underlying them, it is, how do we get to a point of improved identity? Okay, so let's dive into these and I'll give you some tools. Number one is think about purpose. And this is not something that's going to magically appear in your life and nirvana will evolve. It's actually, there's some practical issues to this. In this current recruitment crisis, particularly dealing with millennial and Gen Z employees, there's older ones, of course, but they are the primary ones, and equally dealing with millennial and Gen Z clients, the ones who bought all these puppies, they very much more are attracted to organizations that have a key sense of purpose around that and can exhibit that. So you will attract people to these organizations if you can explicitly find this, and they will remain and thrive within that organization, much more so. Equally, and we know this from the broader world, that investors understand this. You may have heard of the term ESG, which is about environmental, social, and governance issues. And these are sort of the key things of putting purpose around in the broader sense. Are we looking after the planet? Are we looking after the community? Are we managing our businesses well within that? And people are putting money into those businesses as well. So it's not just a recruitment thing. It's actually a practical business strategy to think about, talk about, and try and enact purpose within your business. Okay. Bringing it down to a personal level, this is a nice little model that I quite like from a personal development point of view. This is called Ikigai, I-K-I-G-A-I. There's actually a lovely little book, and if you can just Google it on Amazon, Ikigai. It talks about your reason for being. So this is really focused more on personal reality or purpose driven. And it talks about the 4 factors at work here. And you can apply this to work situation, you can apply it to your home life, you can apply it to work situation, etc. But it's a worthwhile. First of all, we start with what do you love? What's your curiosity and passions that you drive? And I would hope for many of you it's animals and pet care and looking after pets at least, and maybe even looking after clients as well. So, what do you feel a passion for? And then what are you good at? Well, if you're a trained qualified veterinary surgeon or a veterinary nurse or a practice manager, you've been trained to be good at that stuff. Now, you might not have the opportunity to do it. So put what you love and what you're good at together, and you'll have a deep, deep passion at work. That's a large, energetic thing to do. Okay, you get satisfied. But if you're not being paid well for it, or you're under pressure and your professional side doesn't support it, it just leaves you unsatisfied. So the next thing is, what can you get paid for? Well, fortunately, it hasn't been true for many, many years, but you haven't, as vets, we haven't been paid well. Having this discussion this evening with some people who just sort of looking at the veterinary profession, and they're shocked at the low pay levels. With the demand of recruitment at the moment, salaries are going up, which is great, but for the wrong reasons. It is the trouble. Okay, but so what we're looking for is, what do we love? What are we good at? What can we get paid for? Jay, I can see you popped up. Is there maybe some comments?
Just a quick comment on this one. Actually, a question from Jolien. How do you recommend a vet in practice creates a sense of purpose in their practice, particularly if they feel it doesn't exist?
Jolien, that's a really, really good question, and I'm going to answer that in my next slide.
So, well, that put me in my place. I'll disappear.
No, that's fine, but thank you for that.
Thanks, Alan.
Lets me know. And then finally, what does the world need? Now, you can have love and good at and paid for, and you can be in your own little bubble of passion and profession and doing all that stuff. But if you don't then refocus it from an internal view of the world and focus it on the external needs, and this is what creates community and focus, and this is what creates purpose. Purpose is driven by applying your passions to something the world needs outside, bigger than yourself. Otherwise, it's more or less a selfish mission of self-improvement, self-aggrandizement, etc. Okay, it's worth having a look at the book and having a read through. But yeah, back to that question. That's a really good question. Well, it's not the next slide, but it's coming up. So with what we're trying to do is get that centered at the passion, purpose, centered at the central heart of work, helps you navigate uncertainty, inspires commitment, it's more like the compass on a ship or a journey. It's the direction you're heading in. It gives you a guideline to make decisions around the future, and particularly in times of uncertainty. So for any of you on the call who had a pretty good sense of vision or mission before COVID, get it out, reapply it, because that's the best place to start, because nothing's really changed in that, and that will be a good place to take it forward. Okay, the compass direction is still true. What you do to get there may well be different. Equally, these future ready practices will clearly be able to articulate what you stand for, why they exist. So this takes a degree of stress-free, open discussion with your employees, with your other team members and other stakeholders, okay, that inform some of your business choices, okay. So there's a practical reason for doing this, which goes back to Jolene's question. Okay, that sounds great. How do I make that happen? Okay. So just as an example, Vet Dynamics, my company, this was our mission vision statement. We're igniting purpose, passion, people, and performance. Jay mentioned this in the beginning, for independent practices globally. That's what we were before COVID. That's what we carried into COVID. A lot of the way we delivered that was through face-to-face workshops, group coaching. We did some online stuff as well, but a lot of training events. COVID killed our business overnight, just stopped everything. We had to cancel conferences, had to cancel events, had to cancel all sorts of things. And that was tough for us. And we had to support our clients and continue to do that, etc., which was fine. But to be honest, when we sat down and thought about this is now going on and on, we need to rethink this. Did our purpose shift? And the answer was no, okay? What we had to do is go back to the core values or the core tenets of what we did, which was business intelligence, leadership and culture, performance improvement, team engagement. That's what we do for our community. And we had to reinvent a lot of our models, okay? How could we now carry on with that community? So we did massive webinars, we did a massive social media, we did a massive email and online communications. We rebuilt the data index in that time so we could actually give real-time information. We brought in some new tools, help teams cohese together better, find out how they can communicate better. And then our academies and our coaching, we put online, and we had to change the way we did that. We put our conference online. We put our workshops online. And that was, like everyone else, it was a huge... But the point about this, that's what we had to do. But the underlying purpose kept us aligned was the key thing with that. So to answer that question you asked, Jay, there's what I call a motivational stack. And this is probably a tool you can use. And again, you've got to kind of get used to that. So the question, how do you build a sense of legacy and purpose or passion or within a practice if it's not there? Okay, and it is there, but it just might not be the one you want. So it kind of sits in this sandwich, and what you can start at either. But what I'd suggest you do is have a conversation around what are we interested in? Okay, just remind people, and most for veterinary practice, the curiosities, which is a highly positive value to have, as in I'm looking into this because it's interesting and it's a high energy thing. I'm interested in veterinary medicine, I'm interested in surgery, I'm interested in how patients get better, I'm interested in orthopedics, I'm interested, what are our curiosities individually, and get people to talk about those, because if they're truly curious, they will put a lot of energy into that. Then as a group of people, what's our curiosity as a practice? What do we want to be good at, etc.? Now, what you do with this is map as many curiosities across the team as you can, and you just whiteboard this or post-it note or whatever.
Oh. Sorry, Alan, we lost you for a second there, but you're back now. So
where did you lose me?
I don't know where the guys lost you. I just got a note to say that you'd paused. So we don't need to reset. You clear as whistle now, so I'll disappear again.
Okay,
thanks,
cool. I was just saying about curiosities. What are we interested in? Capture those. And what you might have 15, 20, 25 of those. What you want to look at is where is the intersection of those curiosities, because that's often where the passions lie, the common passions in a group of people. Oh, you like that and I like this, but these things intersect here. It's around communication with clients. It's around this particular aspect of veterinary medicine. It's around the way we do preventative healthcare. Okay, that drives a set of passions. That's what the sort of thing that you would do your CPD on, you'd do extra work on, you'd read about, and you'd enjoy doing, because it's enjoyment and curiosity are driving this. Then we got to sit down and say, okay, what do our clients need? What does the world need from us? How can we adapt those curiosities and passions? And obviously, that's all you focus on. This is an 80-20 thing. But what's the 80% that's going to give us, the 20% that's going to give us the 80% of response here is what you want. Then we ask the question, so if that's what the world needs, that's what we're interested in, how can we serve people? What's our point of being here then? Okay, it's to really deliver these curiosity and passions for these people. We've got the internal curiosity, we've got the external need, and that's when we actually call it a purpose. And how you define that, how you write it down, how you actually get some decision on that is, again, a good conversation to have. It's surprising what comes out of it. Now, in veterinary practice, they might sound all very common, but what differentiates this for you is that your curiosities and passions are unique to your business, to your people, the way that works. And this shouldn't be driven by the owners only. This is very much a team discussion, how to get stuff. And to be honest, you sat down to tell us your curiosity, you might get some funny looks. So you've got to build on this and work it through. But if you explain where you're coming from this, what we can do then is start to build from that. We've got a purpose, and it might be a big view of the world, a blue sky sort of thing. But what we're going to build that down to is, so what would we, if in a world that actually we served our purpose, what would that world look like? That's the question you've got to ask. How do we want the world to be? Okay. And I'll give you some tools at the end of this to help you build this up and build it down to. Equally, you're going to have a discussion around what do we value and how do we build culture from that? What's important? And I'm going to come on to that in a bit. Okay, what do we believe to be important about us as a team? Now, you might say, well, my team won't have this, but they will, because it's about them. Once you sort of introduce this and open it up and listen, you'll start to get people saying, well, this is important. Now, you don't have to agree or disagree. You just have to listen to this. What's important drives your mission. So what are you actually going to do? How are you going to shift and adjust and adapt? And of course, what I'm suggesting, a lot of that shifting, adjusting, adapting is not with the clients, it's with your internal team. Setting some goals and setting some standards is then how the journey starts to move forward. Now, I've just outlined a fairly hefty workshop in about 5 minutes, but there is a way of doing this. And like I said, I'll give you a starting point for that at the end of the webinar as well. Start with curiosities, building your passions, being aware of this stuff. Having the conversation is all you need to do. The rest will roll out from that. What are the needs out there? And the needs are for puppies. The needs is for healthcare. The needs is for community. The needs is for actually getting clients engaged and understanding. And perhaps the need is for less clients. Might just be as simple as that. Build a legacy and purpose that we will serve our clients that suit our business the best we can, but we may have to limit that number, etc. Okay, so that's kind of getting that sense of purpose. It's a big piece of work, and I've started on that one because it is a big piece of work, but it is fundamental to the whole conversation we're having here. Next thing is the value agenda. And I mentioned in that stack, once we've sort of got a vision and a mission and a purpose, what's important, what really matters to employees. People engage with what really matters to them. Okay, so they have to have a say in this. Once you've got people who have explicitly committed to what's important to them, that can help you create your differential for your people and for your business, because they will bring passion and importance to that. I've put the apple there because Apple's probably the archetypical values-driven business. Think differently, etc. In all those ways of doing it. Just a note here, we can start to say what's important to us here. Now, it could be things like money, but there are other forms of value and human value. What do we value? Yeah, money. We all want to get paid, we want to make enough money. That's kind of a simple and obvious one out there. But there's also human value. What do we value in each other? Trust, integrity, communication, respect for each other. Those sorts of things are the human potentials that we will value. They have a value and are transmittable for that. Social values of community, of connection, of communication, of compassion. all those things are of social value, because they're actually the glue that holds a group together within a team, and of course with your clients as well. Intellectual value, people's capability of actually doing specialist services, actually the jobs people do have equal value. And what I'm trying to suggest is reducing hierarchy here around vets are really good at this, but nurses only do this. Is the sort of thing we've got to avoid. Intellectually, people have a job to do and deliver that. Okay. Manufactured is really what's the output of us. This is answering the question: what do we do as a practice, and what services do we provide? If you're a single species, multi-species, what's the sort of work you do? You provide preventative healthcare, you provide specialist services. That's a value in itself that is fed from the intellectual, human, and social value. And don't forget, the planet is something we've got to live on, and we've got to leave for our kids and for other people. Can we create value in the way we deal with the planet? And so those things are inputs to our business. They're also outputs to the business. And so spending some, again, these are time-related things, but you have to having spent some time on these, they become obvious value pieces, and it broadens that out for people to think about. And then what I suggest you do is sit down or stand up with your team and start whiteboarding stuff or post-it noting and asking, what is it you guys value? What is it you want? What is it that's important to you for being here? What brings you up? And they will come up with all sorts of ways. There's software online. You can do word clouds. You can actually do post-it notes. You can do all sorts of things. But there's just a little differential here. People will mention stuff that they value, and then what will come out of it is what your values are. Values are attributes of the world or of yourself or of other people that you admire and want to be. Okay, so money is something you could value. Money is important, but money can come and go. So if someone can take it away from you, it's probably not a value. It's just something valuable, etc. So honesty is something that they can't take away from you. Either honest or you're not, basically. Okay, positivity is something you take away. Happiness maybe comes and goes a little bit, but what you want to do is set a set of values for yourself and your team, again, as guidelines. And these are pinned up on the wall, and these are things you reference and things you can talk about to each other and hold each other accountable as well. Now, this is all very soft skill stuff. This is maybe not stuff that many of you would feel comfortable doing. Get an outside facilitator, get other people to help you do it. But this stuff we find when we go into practices, we really have to start here. We're not talking about vision and values up front. Most of else what we talk about doesn't seem to have much impact. People don't engage with it because they're not engaged with the business. If you want to engage clients, you want to engage new employees, you've got to engage the people that are with you. And come right back to basics, you've got to engage yourself. So you've got to have this conversation very much through the process. Here was just something I was doing while I was doing the research on this. I found this resource here, Visual Capital, and it was a recent survey post-COVID of the 20 top global values that the people enjoy, and this is for the for the Western world, America, UK, Australia, etc. Eastern countries had a slightly different set, but not vastly different. So if you wanted sort of a starting point of what people actually value, this is a pretty good place because it's statistically valid. It's not everybody, and there'll be different orders, etc. But hey, it's not a bad list to start with, and I wouldn't suggest you go for 20, but I would even start with your team, pin that up on the wall and say, right, let's pick top 6 guys, everyone, and then post-it note up on the board and let's see what we come up with. Then, okay, if tolerance or courage or kindness is important, why is that so? Because it's really important to narrow it down to things we can actually act on, because this is all hypothetical at the moment. It's nice talk because we've got to get some action out of this. And so, share that if people want it. But from those values, shared, talked about, considered, and built on, you build a culture. And culture is a unique set of behaviors, the rituals, the symbols, the way you talk to each other, your way experiences, the way you turn up, of how we do things around here. Okay, and that's when you start to get engagement, because by this time people are either starting to engage with this or not. Okay, and there is a danger that people say, not interested, not, this isn't me, I'm off. Okay, which is possibly a good thing to happen. Might be a bit damaging at the time. So this becomes the backbone of organizational health and welfare. It fuels outperformance of people because it brings energy, and from energy you get everything else that you need. So if you want robust performance culture, you've got to sort of start building your own secret sauce, and the ingredients are the set of values driven by your purpose that make this happen. What has to come out of that is a work to come up with your specific observable behaviors of how we as employees, as leaders of everyone in this business, work to, adhere to, and talk about, etc. So what you end up with in this another sort of little workshop, you get these are not big workshops, but you sit down and say, and this can be an ongoing, maybe every week or 2 weeks, you spend an hour or two on this, and you start saying, what's our core purpose? And then what do we rules to live by mean? Okay, so working as a team, cooperation is important. So working together will achieve more, we'll support each other through hard times and share each other's success. Well, that's a good behavior, but you have to make that happen. Okay, sustainability, we want to balance our lives by being able to do tomorrow as we did today, for ourselves, for family, for the environment, for business. Now that's a pretty good value to have right now. Okay, and you'll need some very clear behaviors. Do people get home on time? Do people, we acting in service of the planet? Are we actually helping each other survive? Are we helping people? Compassion, guys, and these are an example of it. So some of the ones we deal with in our own business. Okay, but it starts to give you then a framework of reference. But it can't just be a nice talking shop of ideas. It really has to be practical action ideas. So I'm sort of going to pull up there, but I hope that sort of starts the story around how do we strengthen identity? How do we build purpose and work with that? How do we start to explore values of what's important to us? How do we bring those values together as a group of people with a common purpose, common aim, common goal to build a culture that serves each other, serves the client, serves the patient, serves the world for that matter. Okay, but the principle is people long to belong. They want to be part of something bigger than themselves. You as a business leader have that responsibility to build that something bigger. And of course, what you're looking for, are we building a social, caring, compassionate community with purpose and meaning? And if we can do that, we've done pretty well. Okay, so hopefully that might raise some questions for people. We're going to see you again in a couple of months, and we're going to talk about how we operate. This is about structure, about decision making, about choosing talent, looking after talent, and we're going to talk further then after that about how we grow. So hopefully that was useful. And at that point, Jay, I'm going to jump back.
Thank you, Alan. That was actually really, really informative, as I expected. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We've got one question in from Martin, Life and Squires. If we expanded the team to reduce workload and stress, but still the management are lacking time to run things and lack time to build on your ideas, where do we start? Are we just disorganized, or are the bonded clients wanting to see more senior vets the bigger problem? We try to encourage clients to see younger vets and give plenty of time to see cases. Where are we going wrong? That I'm trying to do 3 admin jobs while watching you before I head home for lunch.
Well done, Martin. Some things don't change, do they? But you're doing nothing wrong. You're trying to do everything right, but perhaps you try really hard. I haven't got an obvious solution to you. Reduce workload and stress, I think, is on everyone's agenda for sure. Lacking time to do things. I think when you've got over demand and under resource, it's a real exercise in prioritization. Okay, it's actually, what do I have to do? What's the 80%? What's the 80% I need to get done or needs to achieve? But what's the 20% I've got to do? So you've almost got to eliminate. And it's not going to be 80-20, it could be 70-30, but you've got to actually start to say, I'm doing these 3 management jobs. What if I didn't? Will the world end? What will happen? I mean, if it's the VAT, maybe you got to pay it. But beyond that, are we just in a habitual round of doing these things? I don't know if that helps. Are we just disorganized? Possibly, okay, but that's not surprising, okay, that in this current state, you've got a level of disorganization. It's either disorganized, I don't know where anything is, or overwhelmed, okay, so you've got to differentiate between those 2 things. Am I overwhelmed? There's just too much to do. That's prioritization. Just cut out as much as possible. Delegation can help, but if you've got a team you haven't delegated to before, that's going to suffice. But hey, you've got a chance here to start practicing that as a skill. One of us wanting to see senior vets the bigger problem. Yeah, they might want to see the senior vets, but is that a solution to your problem? Do you actually say, no, look, this is the resource we've got junior vets, if that's what you call them. We've got other colleagues who we'd like to see. And this becomes a rotating thing for your reception desk and say, look, you know, Mr. Squires is just not available at the moment. We can book you in to see whoever. Jenny here, perfectly good vet, perfectly adequate. Off you go. And if the client can choose, and they say, I don't want to see, I want to wait for Mr. Squires. Well, you might have to wait 3 weeks, I'm afraid. It's kind of the choice. This is what I said about taking back some degree of control, autonomy, and accountability for yourself. These are tough decisions. There's no 2 ways about it. You really would struggle to make these decisions, but but this is the priority of values. So coming back to those, is your team health and well-being more important than the client demand? Perhaps, yes, I would agree with that. Is your own personal state of health more important than others? Well, if you're running the business, there is an argument, perhaps, with that. So again, you know, these values start to give you some guidelines for decision making. Doesn't make the decisions easy. It just means that you now have a sense of working on that. Hope that helps. Is there anything else there?
That's all for those. Just some great talk, Alan's coming through, which I have to agree with. As Alan did say, we are back again on the 1st of December, same time, 7 p.m., 1st of December. All of you that are with us now, you're pre-registered for all 3, so you'll get a notification reminder a couple of days before to let you know we're coming up. But it's the 1st of December. Fingers crossed to be a slightly cooler evening for Alan and I. Come on, Alan.
Jay, I forgot to mention, I've put a file up there of how to, back to Jolly and Scott, how do we build a vision? So I've actually put a document in the file that I think you're going to share.
I've just done that.
Okay, so if anyone's interested in that, go and download that. It's a bit of a written exercise, but it's a good starting point for building a sense of vision and values, what you do want, what you don't want in your business. So it's a starting point. If that's useful, please use it. Free, there's nothing in it. But if, again, I would just put out the invitation. If this has inspired you to want to do something, you're not sure where to start, give us a call at Vet Dynamics. More than happy to have a discussion and see where you are with that.
Great stuff. We'll share Alan's details on our follow-up emails so you can get in touch with him directly. Alan, thank you so much. Very much looking forward to the 1st of December, to the second part of this 3-part series. So just for you guys' benefit, if you would like a CPD certificate to prove your attendance today, do drop it in the chat box, just saying yes, we'll do. We'll keep an eye on those and we'll send the CPD certificate out for you. If you really enjoyed today, please let your colleagues know, your peers, if you're at an event, and you've seen the CPD and you think it will benefit somebody else to come and join us for the second one. This one is available on demand immediately after we finish live. So a link will be sent out to you. So if you want to pass it on to the colleagues in practice, feel free to do so. Let them have a watch and let them hear the inspiring talk from Alan. And we'll see you all again on the 1st of December. To find out more about our current webinars that are available on demand and future ones, visit VisioCareServices.co.uk/CPD, but that will be on any future emails. Alan, thanks again. That was absolutely brilliant. I really, really enjoyed that. And to everyone that's watched, I do appreciate it. I know it's very, very warm this evening. You're probably wanting a glass of wine and a chill. So go off and do that. We're going to. And we'll see you again on the 1st of December. Thanks, Alan.
Dave. Thanks, everyone.
Good night, everyone. Bye-bye.